Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Leadership Talks for Emerging Leaders. Leadership Talks is a podcast hosted by Leadership Card, a leadership coaching training organization. Leadership Card is on a mission to support 1 million emerging leaders to solve problems for self, others, and the organization. It's the brainchild of four individuals who had a common vision: Kiran Sandhu, Ashish Datta, Ram Ramakrishnan, and Devesh Mohan. Leadership Card runs leadership programs for individual contributors and corporate clients. Our coaches collectively have over 100 years of experience and come from diverse fields such as academics, finance and operations, real estate, and sales. Every week on Leadership Talks, we invite leaders from varied fields and industries to share their stories and share tips and strategies which you can apply in your growth journey. I'm your friend Kiran Sandhu, a leadership communication coach, and I'm hosting today's episode along with Mr. Ram Ramakrishnan. Today we will be discussing building corporate leadership. Over to you, Ram.
Thank you, Kiran. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to the viewers across the globe. In today's episode, we are privileged to have presence of a person who strongly believes I own my learnings, my life experience inspires me. That is none other than Dr. Sridhar Raghavendra. He's a corporate executive, urban real estate observer, author, mentor, coach, speaker, startup evangelist, and a golfer. Dr. Sridhar is a pragmatic facilities management and corporate real estate professional driven by passion, enabling business to succeed, gives him joy and value adding things that can be scaled through transformation. He describes the reason for being in business enabling role as he believes that facilities management, corporate real estate can create positive impact and drive change by building brand culture and innovative solution. Welcome, Dr. Sridhar, for our show.
Thanks, Ram. Thanks, Kiran. And thanks for giving me time or giving me an opportunity to be with you people today evening. And I hope that we will have a good discussion around more from a knowledge sharing perspective, not from
Absolutely.
any opinion aspects. Thank you very
Perfect.
much.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Sridhar. First, I would like to ask, can you share you got the doctorate and what triggered you to get that doctorate and how is that helping you in the profession? And we strongly believe one of the things is lifelong learning is something is very important and everyone as a leader should pursue. In that regard, what are your thoughts?
So basically, doing doctorate was not in my qualification roadmap. Only when I entered into the corporate world, and then after a few years of my corporate experience, I had an opportunity to be a contributing writer to some of the international magazines, and also in India. Then I authored two books, more on business operation and facility management, and that was the time I think you know. It struck me, why not look at doing something, around, and get qualified around the PhD and things like that. So my guide was Professor Subbarov. When I reached him, he said he guided me what needs to be done and things like that. So then, you know, uh, my application went into the HRD ministry, and then it went to Niti Aayog. Then from there it went to University of Geneva, and here in Bangalore I had my coach, the guide, where we prepared the whole process. Fortunately for me, all my white papers and my book became my thesis. I mean, basically, since my specialization was in business operation and corporate management, so that helped me to pursue my passion to do the doctorate, and that's how I landed. But at the end of the day, I think when I look back, whatever I did, curiosity leads to research. I think that's probably the game changer for me personally, because
Mhm.
when I was writing the white papers on different, spectrum or different, topics in the broad spectrum of, business operation, I think that is what led to me. So yeah, I mean, I think fortunately I was able to sail through and complete my doctorate. That's how I landed, basically.
Wonderful.
And I'm sure that is definitely helping you the ladder what you climbed up kind of a thing as well, right? For
Yeah.
would you like to
So
share any thought?
yeah,
Mm.
I think that has given the opportunity for me to look from a enterprise level and
Mm.
be part of the strategic evolution. So since when with these things, you one needs to one understand the stack of financial modeling, or in terms of the business creation or value creation, or in terms of business orientation or customer orientation, or the financial impacts, or the physical improvement, and so on and so forth. So that's a complete stack that gives you understand and be part of the business. So that is what the value that brings in, especially on a personal front, with this doctorate. So and good thing is that you tend to understand the economics better,
Mm.
right? Because usually in the corporate world, of course, in the manufacturing they do talk about, but when you talk about from an IT industry perspective, the most common verbatim is ROI, right?
Mm.
So
Mm. Mhm.
basically, it is not ROI, it is ROIC, right? And
Mm.
there's something called as ROCE also. In
Mhm.
IT, we don't talk about ROCE, return on capital employed,
Mm.
right? Return on capital, return on investment on capital, right? So
Mhm.
we don't talk about ROC, but we talk about ROI, right? The primary ratio is not complete, basically, when you look from that perspective. So these are some of the things that gives you opportunity, or that with the knowledge that you can bring value on the table for any organization.
Wonderful. Very insightful.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Very insightful. So the next one I wanted to ask this question is because I started my career when into the corporate real estate facilities very early in the stage. That point of time, there is a lot of myths were there. Now I moved out of corporate for 5 years. I wanted to know from you what are the some of the myths about business service leadership that you would like to break for our audience today? Because one of the thing is during my time, it used to be people used to say that it's a thankless job. I think
Mm.
to large extent, I have broken that myth, saying that yes, you do something, it will be people will thank you, appreciate what they do. Like that, what are all some of these myths do you think?
Good question. No, I think, see, I think it's a complete. Everybody has a different stack, but the common factor when we talk about myths is in terms of, let us say, harnessing the demographic culture, right? So that could be one of the top, myths when you talk about, or you talk about, let us say, leaders needs to be extrovert, right?
Hmm.
So there is a very thin line when you talk about extrovert and being a good communicator, right? So I mean that is also one of the myths, I would say. And they also, one of the other myths is that only the boss can lead, right? Or only the leaders can lead. That's also myths. Today in today's this thing, it is not true at all. Actually, if you look at that
Mm.
way,
Yes.
right?
Mm.
Management equal leadership. Now,
Mm.
when you talk about management equal leadership, right, in those days those terms were coming out, and that is what we are supposed to deliver. That is what we need to, that is what we were a conduit between the management and the business. We were
Mm.
conduit between management, business, and employees, right? So when you look from a holistic perspective, a certain verbatims are not actually aligned today, but what when we started off in those days, right? So these are some of the things when you look at from the myths is concerned. One leadership style fits for all, right? So that is also a myth, right? And when you talk about pure business operation, it is more on delivery, right? It is not, now, earlier it used to be delivery. Today it is more on solution or enabling, right? We don't talk about delivery today, right? So these are some of, I think it's a stack when you talk about the myths in business services, because to be on the service side, you need a different DNA, right? Not everybody cannot be on the service side. It is very easy to be on the client side, right? Until
Yes.
unless you come with that kind of a DNA and you wear that hat of an enabler, right? Then you fit in that the thing. Otherwise, because here you need both approach and attitude needs to be there, and with the right combination of knowing what needs to be done, so what is needed and how it needs to be delivered is also one of the things, right? So it's a complete stack today.
Thank you for that.
I think one of the myths that you've also broken is that people who are in this profession don't need a doctorate, probably because many people don't pursue it. Because what is the value being added? So I think just by even pursuing a doctorate and bringing something unique, looking at the organization from a different perspective, and what you just shared right now about the ROCE and ROIC, these are factors that people maybe though it's not there in research. I mean, it wasn't there until you probably started writing those white papers and coming up with this idea. So I think those were myths too that you've broken by actually
Definitely.
pursuing about.
See, being in business operation, you don't need a doctorate. You need to be a
Exactly.
human. You need to be a
Exactly.
human before, right? Then
Yeah.
everything falls into place, right?
Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, there is always individual aspiration versus organizational aspiration, right?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
this will help you to bridge these two things, right? So
Mhm.
that's
Yeah.
the only thing.
Yes, it helps you to bridge. Okay, let me now bring you, Sridhar. I'm sure you've been in this journey for a long time. You have been climbing the corporate ladder. You're heading it to, but as a leader, number one, like what were some of the key challenges that you faced in your journey, and then how did you overcome them?
So I'll try to bring in my past and present.
Absolutely.
In those days, I think, administration, or let us say facility management, was more in terms of managing infrastructure. But
Mm-hmm.
today, I think in the last 10 years, things have changed. It is managing people, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think those days, that was the challenge. And earlier, it used to be more focused on infrastructure than people, right? We were busy building facilities, creating infrastructures for business, trying to add value to them, be part of the whole consortium to to bake an optic which can deliver. Because uh, when I think probably 95, 96, with the whole evolution of facility management started, we had to recreate uh, a facility which was 10,000 kilometers away in the US,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you're creating a home away from home. So
Mm-hmm.
you can see the gap, right? And that is where I think the whole discussion was around the infrastructure. Today, it is more of people. We don't talk about infrastructure. Infrastructure is just a piece of the whole ecosystem. It is not everything, right? So I think that was one of the key challenges. And as in time, moved on, I think we started understanding, business, the economics of business. We started anticipating what is coming in, right? And that could happen only because there is something called as the zero zone. In the zero zone, we used to always be with the business, right? And that is how we were able to understand what business is all about. What is the life cycle of, let us say, a software industry, right? We never knew what was the life cycle. We never knew what was the life cycle of a product. We never knew the life cycle of a project, right? So then, the biggest challenge was to understand, right, and interpret it in the business language, right,
Mm-hmm.
as part of expectation setting. So I think those, that was one of the key challenges, I think, and it was only I think the effort was to be with the business, try to understand, and become one of them, so that confidence building becomes easier. The moment we take them into confidence, what happened at some point of time, the business leader used to manage 80% of my operation. I used to manage only 20%, because that was the call. we had already taken into confidence, right? And that was the understanding. So to get there, right, the whole journey itself is a, there are so many showstoppers and hurdles, those things. So and that was one of the key challenges. And I think the other challenge was in terms of, the convergence of cost center versus delivery versus people centric, right? Uh,
Mm.
when everything came together, because we were always evolving around the cost centric mode, right? And suddenly, delivery becomes one of the key factor, right? So then, you have the, employee centric. So
Mm.
when you have to bring all the thing together, and today we talk about engagement, today we talk about employee experience, but these two terms, if you look from a evolution perspective, there are multiple, molecules involved to create a, a product or a concept, right? So that is one of the challenges. I think even today the challenges still exist. It is not that somebody has found a solution to that, because every day is going to be a different day, and I think we live with it, and there is always a perseverance, and we are part of the learning curve. So I think that is one thing, which is a key challenge which will exist going forward. It was, it is, and it will be, right?
Mm.
The other key challenges in terms of workplace philosophy, right? Uh, these are all new things that was coming up, and understanding what is workplace philosophy itself probably took us a year or two to understand what does it mean. So those were the challenges, because and that time, even the expats were, the inflow of expats into the country was very high, and we had to talk in their language, in terms, because the verbatims are different from two geos, right? So, and there are only two things that you can do at a point of time: either join the gang or change the gang.
Mm.
So I think we all jumped into being join the gang rather than changing the gang. So that is some of the, one of the, probably the biggest challenge, we have gone through. And uh, the the other thing was, especially when you are in a IT services kind of a business, uh, especially trying to drive or harness the continuous physical improvement, right?
Mm.
Being in a business enabling function, I think we were playing on the bottom line rather than the top line. So we were more in terms of, we were playing on the profitability, not on the revenue,
Mm.
right? And any needle movement, small changes in our spectrum, there was always an value add on the table. And doing a deep stick analysis in terms of how we can transform or how we can drive the waste management programs or any initiatives that can trigger a needle movement on the profitability was also a big challenge, because it needed a lot of financial literacy to understand, the P&L game. Even today, it is the same thing, right? So that is one of the key challenges. And then, there was a time we talked about technology in workplace, right? Now, when you want to automate the process, right, engineering the process, and from a technology perspective, we had to literally do a lot of research, right?
Right.
And we need to understand the business logic of our current business process, right?
Mm.
And not being from a technical background, you're trying to do something very scientific, right? So that needed a lot of effort, right? Because and time was one thing that made us navigate into the whole thing, that because the commitment on engineering the change was always within us, right? So that was one of the key challenges, I would say. And especially the baking the coffee bean syndrome, that was also one of the key challenges,
And what was
because
that?
coffee bean is a commodity, right?
Mhm.
Now, a commodity like coffee bean, now you want to make it as a product, which
Mhm.
becomes a coffee powder, which you talk about Nescafes and brews and
Right.
things like that, right? Now, from a product, you have to evolve to make it as a services. Then you have
Mm.
a coffee vending machines and things like that. Then
Mm.
from services, you want to make it an experience, your Starbucks and things like that. So, so creating that experience in an enclosed ecosystem, right,
Ah,
was like baking a coffee bean syndrome. So
hmm.
I think that was that is still a big challenge, right? Because
There is still a challenge, and I think a
it
lot
is
of
always
industries,
it
yeah.
is always a challenge, and especially engineering the change from a service delivery versus business outcome. Right,
Right.
today we talk about business outcome. Globally, I think the CEOs or the CFOs today, they are no more keen in buying services. They are
Hmm.
more keen on buying outcomes, right?
Right.
So there is a paradigm shift. There is a convergence that is happening. Then there is
Hmm.
technology coming in. There is economics coming in. There is business coming in. So
Hmm.
there are you are calibrating and simulating multiple things at a time, right? So
Hmm.
I think that is also a
A challenge
key
and
challenge.
an opportunity, challenge and an opportunity. Ram, you've been in the industry. Why don't you share? Yeah.
And that's what I listening to Dr. Sridhar is reminds me of another thing. No, if we had like iPhone and other thing has got a version, and if you had a version of changes what had happened in this services industry, it would
Hmm.
have been thousands and thousands of numbers would
Hmm.
have gone, and each of
Hmm.
us has gone through that. That is the opportunity as well as the challenge.
Yeah.
Basically, you look at as an opportunity, you learn. You
Hmm.
start looking at kind of a thing. It's a challenge. I don't know. There are people flourished and perished. Both had was there. Like
Yeah,
the people looked at took that as a challenge and moved up. They flourished in their career.
I think
They
we
looked
were
at it
pretty
as
lucky,
something.
to
What
be
is
honest. We were pretty lucky because for me, if I have to define luck, when preparation meets with an opportunity, is called as luck. So I think we
Yes.
were
yes,
pretty lucky on that front.
Hmm.
yes, yes,
Uh,
Hmm.
yes,
the other thing that came into my mind is aligning the business operation strategy to business key drivers, right?
Hmm.
So that was also one of the challenges, because I've been through wherein my KPIs and KRAs were aligned to the business KPIs and KRIs, right?
Hmm.
Otherwise, if that is not happening, two people are working in an isolated, right? And we talk about corporate strategy, corporate goal, but within the corporate, two functions are working isolation. It doesn't make sense. There has to be a conduit.
Yes.
So, as a business enabler, my KPIs or KR was always aligned to the business KPI. So, I think that was also aligning our strategy to key business drivers. So, even today, I think it is a challenge
Yes.
because bringing all the businesses together to understand their challenges from an enabler perspective is also difficult, but that can
Absolutely.
happen only when we create that kind of a ecosystem. So that is also a key challenge.
Thank you so much. Ram, would you like to ask the next question?
yeah. I think you were given lot more on information what had
Yeah, a lot
happened,
of
what
challenges.
our
Yeah,
challenges and opportunities and how.
absolutely.
So one of the things I considered this function is any service function you are working more than the project or product function. You learn a lot. That's what has happened, and the
Hmm.
dynamics with which the things has to be looked at and addressed is totally different than any other thing. So, given all that, I would like, based on, if we have to share we talk about emerging leader. There are new generation of people who are coming into this field. What are share some of the three lessons to emerging leader from your experience? Then, what it should be? What are those some three lessons which you wanted to tell them to look at?
So
And
if I have to probably connect to today's business environment globally, the first lesson I'm sure, as for any emerging leader, is to understand or to make sure that there's a lot of time and research spent on the probably the behavioral dynamics of workplace and
Hmm.
the human dimension of workplace, right?
Hmm.
There are two things, right? One is the behavioral dimension and there is a workplace dimension. And
Hmm.
today, globally, I think every company is talking about now the work science as a concept. That is going to be a very clinical approach to business, how the business operation is going to operate going forward, right?
Hmm.
And this is one of the things it's very very important for any leader to understand, in terms of to draw any business plans or strategies, because the behavioral dynamics and the workplace dimension. This is one thing that I think is very important as a lesson. I think we have done this in the especially uh, the during the pandemic, because pandemic was very new to everybody. I mean, probably being in a business enabling function, I think everybody had done everything but except running a vaccination drive. I think that was
Mm.
an opportunity, which was a learning curve for us also, because we had never done something before, right? And today things have changed. I mean, traditional approaches have gone. There is more a scientific approach coming into the organization, and every business leader is thinking about it and trying to bake some product or solution around the current challenges, right? It could be on a sustainability, or it could be on a ESG, or it could be on the clinical aspects of the scientific approach to the business operation side. So I think behavioral dynamics in workplace and workplace dimensions are the key. I think this will evolve in the long run. It has just started, so I think that is one thing, could be a focused area, and there could be a lot of lesson that can be learned with the pandemic, and can uh, make it more bring in more holistic approach to bring in the clinical side of it. So that is something that I think is one lesson that we have learned with this change. The other thing is in terms of uh, unpacking the impact, right? Uh, One thing as a emerging leader, it has to be part of your DNA. The bad news needs to take the elevator. The good news need to take the stairs,
I like
and
that.
unpack the impact. That is very important, right?
Mhm.
And learn to say no with this, right, which is very, very important. So I
Mm.
think that is going to be one of the key things as a learning. And the third is build community to communicate, right?
Mm.
And being in business operation, now selling is very important, right? And the only way you can do selling of your accomplishment, right, or it could be the change management, or it could be a transformation program.
Mm.
You have to build community to communicate
Mm.
within your organization, within your ecosystem. Start building community. Who will be the carrier of your message, or who
Mm.
will carry your communication across, right? Because at the end of the day, it is very important to create that brand, and selling is going to be the key, right? For
Mm.
example, Ram worked in big organization like Wipro. When he was a leader out there, probably for Ram and the whole leadership team, selling Wipro to Wipro employee was the key, right?
Mm.
If that is delivered, I think they have done a good job, right?
Mm.
So that is build community to communicate. So that is one lesson. Then adaptability,
Mm.
right? Uh, Creating that you know environment, and making sure your team or your people uh, have that DNA of adaptability to change, right? That is, change should not be a shocker. Change needs to be a process, and
Mm.
change needs to navigate that adaptability spectrum. So I think
Mm.
that is going to be one of the other lesson. And psychology of safety, right? So
Mm.
today I think that is going to be the key, and I keep talking about the psychological safety of workplace today.
Mhm.
I think that is going to be one of the most important key drivers when we talk about a lesson, wherein we influence people to do certain things, to come back to office or to do anything. I think that is going to be one of the lessons that we need to probably deep dive, and keep learning and be part of the learning curve. I think these are some of the lessons that, and the most important thing is that empowerment, right?
Empowerment. Mhm.
So empowerment, basically in terms of accountability, ownership, driving that sense of belongingness,
Mm.
right? Because at the end of the day, every employee works to be visible and do
Yep.
something fame to claim, right? And that can
Mhm.
happen only when you are when you empower. The most important lesson for the young leaders is learn to appreciate others,
No,
If you're thinking that somebody has done a good job, you should be the first person to stand up and appreciate, right? In any forum, it could
mm,
be on an email, it could be on your conferences, but learn to stand up and appreciate. Not necessarily it could be in your team, but the other function, cross function also. Stand
do
up
it.
and appreciate.
I would like to say that you have given solid punches and solid lines and advice to our emerging leaders. They are brilliant takeaways. But as we are close to the end of the show, I want to say thank you to all our viewers today. Thank you to Dr. Sridhar for being with us on this show and sharing such power packed knowledge from the industry. I'm sure there are lots of lessons for all our emerging leaders who have listened to this knowledge sharing session. With that, this is Kiran, Sandhu, Ram Ramakrishnan, and Dr. Sridhar signing off till we meet next week or our next show on Leadership Talks for Emerging Leaders. Thank you
Thank you
for
very much, Ram, Kiran.
Thank
Appreciate your
you.
time. Look forward for such discussion going forward. Thank you very much.